That's what Al-Shawkani said, though others, like Al-Hakim, said that it was sahih. So for instance, if we enter the supermarket or what have you, we should say that invocation. And then the market doesn't have to be a place of heedlessness, though typically that's the case. So the Prophet ﷺ said that the most beloved of lands to Allah are their mosques, and the most hated of lands to Allah are markets. And that's because it'll be a place of deceit, it'll be a place of cheating, it'll be a place of heedlessness, but it doesn't have to be that way. And a person may enter the market and receive reward. And in the Muslim world, the pious of the past, it was a place of dhikr and a place of knowledge. So for instance, Junayd bin Muhammad, who's known as the foremost of the group in Baghdad, he was a merchant, and he was an attar, he would sell perfume. And he would go to his store, and before doing business in the day, pray a wird of 300 rak'ahs. He would pray 300 rak'ahs, and then he would engage in buying and selling while doing dhikr. So imagine the light that is going to be in those type of transactions. And then when you engage in transactions, you should intend giving benefit. So for instance, the owner of a store who stocks food stuff and household items or clothing and what have you, and he intends benefiting others by bringing that merchandise for their use, then that's a good intention. And similarly, if the person purchases things and they intend engaging in beneficial commerce that gives benefit to others, then that's a good intention. And then they're acting in a way that's in conformity to the sacred law. Similarly, that's a good work. And avoiding the haram and engaging in the halal and being honest. So the Prophet ﷺ said in Ibn Majah, At-Tajir, Al-Amin, Al-Saduq, Al-Muslim, Ma'a Shuhada, Yawm Al-Qiyamah. He said that a merchant who is trustworthy and very truthful and Muslim will be with the martyrs on the day of judgment. So a person who's engaging in business can be in a very high station in the hereafter through that mundane activity because of their obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and because of their following the Sharia and doing so in a manner which is truthful. However, the Prophet ﷺ also said, and this hadith is in At-Tirmidhi, and it is Hasan, or Hasan Sahih, he said, Inna tujar yub'ath yawm al-qiyamah fujjaran illa. He said, indeed, the merchants will be resurrected on the day of rising as the corrupt, except, and then he made an exception. He said, except the one man ittaqa wa barra wa sadaq, except the one who has taqwa, the one who's wary of Allah or God-fearing, and good or pious and truthful. And that's related by Tirmidhi. So it can go either way. And this is an example of commerce, but that will apply to almost anything. That almost anything that you engage in, if you do so with a good intention and following the sunnah, which means in the widest sense to follow the sacred law, particularly if you combine it with prophetic etiquettes, a good intention and prophetic etiquettes, it can be from the best of works. And we need people that are engaged in mundane activities that do that. So we need, for instance, merchants that are pious with a good intention and following prophetic etiquettes and truthful. We need doctors similarly. Many of the rulings of the sacred law, without people in the medical field, you can't even practice them. Fasting, for instance, if you wanted the excuse to break your fast, you either have to know from experience that your illness will render you unable to fast, or an upright doctor has to tell you you can't fast. And for that we need upright doctors with knowledge. And similarly, IT, and similarly, engineering, and similarly, but again, it has to be a person that's done so, willing to obey Allah and have taqwa and follow the sunnah, and that they obviously should try to follow prophetic etiquettes, and then it can be a very good work. And typically though, unfortunately, many times merchants will fall into being corrupt because of their being deceitful or what have you, and then for that reason, markets are places that are oftentimes places of heedlessness. So for that reason we find the Prophet ﷺ saying that the most hated of lands to Allah are the markets. And for this reason, for instance, the pious of the past, until recently, would oftentimes prevent their children from going to the market. So like One of our teachers, his name is Habib Ali Mashhur bin Muhammad bin Salim bin Hafiz, and he's probably in his 60s. Until when he was young, the families that were known for knowledge and religiosity wouldn't even allow their children to go to markets. So for instance, in Tarim, there's a market at the center of town, and if the family needed something and they didn't have anyone else who could buy something, they would send the child and have him wait at a specific place on one of the paths into the market, and they say that, wait there in front of the house, so-and-so's house, and if someone's going, have them buy it for you and then come back. So like and Hassan knows Habib Mashhur. Habib Mashhur's, as late as him being a child, he would go and stand in front of a certain pathway on the marketplace, on the way to the market, and someone would pass by and see, this is Habib Muhammad bin Salim's son. He's from one of the houses of knowledge, and they're not going to let him go hang out in the market. So he would stop there, and then he'd say, my family needs this or that. They need, a kilo of rice or 2 kilos of meat or whatever, rattle they call it, a pound of meat. And then he would go and buy it, and then bring it back to the child, and the child would go home to his family, and they would keep them away from those places because they were places of heedlessness. So similarly, just because we engage in commerce and what have you with a good intention, that doesn't mean that it's for everybody. So we should also protect our kids from that. Nowadays, khalas, if you take your kid to the market, to the supermarket, they have merchandise at the child's level that is advertised specifically to entice the child. And if you observe your children when you go to those places, you can watch their hearts become more attached to the dunya. Because they'll see this or they'll see that, they'll start, if they're not well disciplined, they'll be grabbing it off the shelves, touching it, picking it up, because what it's designed to do is to entice them. And one of the things that we should try to protect our kids from is having a heart that is attached to the world. So that's something to pay in mind. And in any case, take that as an indication of some of the adab that Allah preserved from the heirs of His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So to conclude, we mentioned that there are 3 integrals of buying and selling. In summary, they are those conducting the transaction, the article of transaction, and the agreement. So that becomes the buyer and the seller, the price and the item, and the offer and acceptance. And the author here spoke specifically to the conditions of the price and the item, and that they are pure of benefit and owned. And again, you understood the owned meant that they were both authorized to conduct the transaction. And then we added 2, that the person can receive it, and also that it be known to both parties, either by them both looking at it or it being quantified and described. So, inshallah ta'ala, pay attention to those, and all of us, with perhaps a few 3 exceptions, would fit the description of those who could conduct transactions. And provided we don't force anyone into a transaction, those should be valid. And we will discuss transactions of an item that is not present, that is described in upcoming lessons, inshallah ta'ala. And we seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from knowledge which is not of benefit. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to teach us that which benefits us, and benefit us by that which He has taught us, and that He increases us in guidance. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sallam, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. La ilaha illallah.
You say a spoken offer and acceptance, and there's this long ayah at the end of Baqarah that talks about people having written agreements about things, even with witnesses, that's better. Well, does that interfere with this?
No. The offer and acceptance ideally would be spoken, but as we said, that typically everyone now engages in just exchanges where there is an offer and acceptance, but it's that the mutual satisfaction is understood. So the person's turning over the item and receiving the price is indicative of acceptance, and that suffices. And the verse of Baqarah is called the verse of Dain. Ayat al-Mudayana, and that is about loaning someone, and that when money is loaned, that there should be witnesses, and that should be written down. there's a difference of opinion whether that's praiseworthy or obligatory. And the Shafi'is view that to be praiseworthy and not obligatory, but in any case it's talking about debt and not talking about sales.
What if you're selling something and you know the person is going to be doing something haram with what you're selling?
It's not permissible. It's not permissible. That's one of the conditions of the person conducting the transaction. I didn't mention it, but the example they mentioned is selling weapons to someone who's making combat against the Muslims, for instance. It's not permissible. Or selling weapons to a robber, they mentioned. So selling a gun to someone who you know is going to go rob someone, it's not permissible. And there's a general rule of thumb that aiding anyone in sin is not permissible. You can't assist someone in sin. So if you know someone's going to take the $5 they spare change you for and go buy a 40-ouncer, that is a large malt liquor. You can't give it to them because you know that they're going to go use it for impermissible purposes.
When you said it was looked at as being just recommended, the witnesses and the writing down are both looked at as being recommended?
A lot knows best. Some schools view it as obligatory, but Shafi'i view that as recommended. And Allah knows best. I think the Zahiris definitely view it as obligatory.
Wow.
The Zahiris, they tend to be quite literal in their school. La ilaha illallah. Alhamdulillah. No other questions? Alhamdulillah. So we'll read a little bit of the beginning of guidance, if you could pause. When you engage in transactions, you should intend giving benefit. So for instance, the owner of a store who stocks food stuff and household items or clothing and what have you, and he intends benefiting others by bringing that merchandise for their use, then that's a good intention. And similarly, if the person purchases things and they intend, that's what Al-Shawkani said, though others, like Al-Hakim, said that it was sahih. So for instance, if we enter the supermarket or what have you, we should say that invocation. And then the market doesn't have to be a place of heedlessness, though typically that's the case. So the Prophet ﷺ said that the most beloved of lands to Allah are their mosques, and the most hated of lands to Allah is the foremost of the group in Baghdad. He was a merchant, and he was an attar, he would sell perfume. And he would go to his store, and before doing business in the day, pray a wird of 300 rak'ahs. He would pray 300 rak'ahs, and then he would engage in buying and selling while doing dhikr. So imagine the light that is going to be in those type of transactions. And then engaging in beneficial commerce that gives benefit to others, then that's a good intention. And then they're acting in a way that's in conformity to the sacred law. Similarly, that's a good work. And avoiding the haram and engaging in halal and being honest. So the Prophet ﷺ said in Ibn Majah, At-Tajir al-Amillah are markets. And that's because it'll be a place of deceit, it'll be a place of cheating, it'll be a place of heedlessness, but it doesn't have to be that way. And a person may enter the market and receive reward. And in the Muslim world, the pious of the past, it was a place of dhikr and a place of knowledge. So for instance, Junayd bin Muhammad, who's known